Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for CEO Exclusive, brought to you by Anona Enterprises.
Good morning and welcome to CEO Exclusive, where we get emerging trends from CEOs and their most trusted advisors. I'm your host, Soyini Koch. We're always really excited about talking about money on CEO Exclusive, and we haven't had anybody in the financial advisory world in the show in a while. And so I'm really delighted to welcome to today's show RichLife Advisors, their CEO, Beau Henderson, and their Chief Compliance Officer, Joel Wilsford. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you, Sohini.
We're excited to be here.
Well, I am excited to have you. So tell us, Beau, what's happening in the world of financial advisory that you think our CEO listeners need to be aware of?
Well, one of the things and the big overarching trend that I see is this idea of there's been this kind of set idea of what financial planning is, what retirement planning is. Yet people that were financially successful, we were finding more and more getting to retirement and actually not being successful and running into some other problems, what I call non-financial aspects of retirement, such as depression, divorce, a lot of things happening because they weren't transitioning and preparing for the transition for the things that you might not see on your spreadsheet, so to speak.
Well, tell us what some of those non-financial considerations might be. What do you, when people are thinking about retirement, I started off by saying, let's talk about money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. That's what you think. That's what people are managing. That's what they're managing towards, is making sure that they have the kind of lifestyle that they've built and been used to. But you're saying that there are other things that people need to think about. What are those other things?
There's this whole, what I'm seeing is this blend of the traditional retirement planning world and what's emerging as a retirement coaching world. And I think you're going to see more and more be a norm within the next 3 to 5 years of people not only having maybe a retirement planner or a financial advisor, but also having a retirement coach to help with this transition.
So what do people need coaching on when they're just going to go play golf for 8 hours a day?
That's what you would think. So what happens is when you're used to, especially in the executive space, when you're used to hard charging, driving, running business things for 30, 40 years, and you stop, golf's fun for about 1 to 3 months, and then you're bored in a lot of cases. So one of the first things I run into has a significant impact on people is identity, because you ask somebody, especially that's running a business, who you are, 99% of the time, they're going to identify with, I'm this person that does this thing at my business. I'm the CEO of this company, or I have, that's who I am. Mm-hmm. Right. You get into retirement and that's no longer the case. One of the things we want to really work on transitioning into before you get there and figure it out is, who am I going to be in retirement? Right. Am I going to start a small business, be a business owner? Am I going to be a philanthropist? What is it that I'm going to be in retirement? Because I see a lot of bad things happen when we get there and we kind of lose our identity, so to speak.
Mm. Joel, and how are you seeing this show up for you? What are you, give us your perspective on this?
Well, I'm more of the numbers cruncher. So, but it is really that people don't know. And we already know from statistics that the single biggest cause for most divorces is money stress. So consequently, if they're not working through the issue of who we are, they often turn to spending money inappropriately to create for them their identity. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm.
What are some of the other non-financial considerations that you're seeing, Beau?
I was smiling as Joel was talking about relationships, because another one is relationships. For most people, most of their interaction and their with
social
people,
connection.
Social connection is with people at work in a lot of cases. And then the other thing what made me smile was, I was in Houston a couple weeks ago and I had a couple. I was talking to a guy and I said, how's retirement going? He had just retired. He said, it's great, Beau. I'm loving it. Just going perfect. So I was like, cool. And on the way out of the restaurant, his wife pulled me to the side and said, Beau, Jim is driving me crazy. Please get him a hobby, get him a job, do anything. So that relationship, that relationship was strained because she was used. They saw each other 3 or 4 hours a day, and on the weekends, and that worked good for the last 40 years. Now they're just there together, and they're having to figure it out. So relationships change.
Mm-hmm.
So what that really means is we're not just simply financial advisors; we're behavioralists. We're coaching on behavior as well as the financing side of it. And that's becoming, I think, going to ultimately become where a real financial advisor will show themselves.
Mm-hmm. A retirement coach.
Right.
Any other considerations that you think are important?
Well, another couple that I would say is health. If we can pay attention to our health in that window between, say, that 10-year transition window between our working life and our retirement life, let's do some things to put ourselves in a good position as far as our health goes, because I've seen a lot of low satisfaction ratings in retirement, of course, when we're trying to deal with failing or bad health. And that can have a lot to do with the success of our retirement if we're miserable, if we're having to spend all our money on healthcare. So take care of our health. You don't think about that in a retirement plan, but it should be part of a retirement strategy.
Mm-hmm. And not just the finances associated with the health, but as Joel said, the behaviors associated with health.
Right.
One of the things that comes up a lot on the show is technology. And I'm wondering how technology is changing your industry. Like some of the cutting edge technologies like artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, all that. Is that changing? Are you seeing any effects on that in your industry?
One of the biggest things, and this came up in a conversation yesterday, is this idea of predictive analytics. And we're seeing a lot in kind of the underwriting of insurance, or even when you're looking at long-term care, is there's so much information out there that it's almost scary to think that when you look up something online, you're seeing based on so many factors about you that are known that you may not realize, like where you live, what else you buy, so much data. And in the life insurance example, which is one I've run into a lot, is now it's not just if you're healthy, you qualify for good rates on life insurance. They're looking at your driving record, which they always have. They're also looking at things like your credit, and they're looking at all kinds of data to determine if you're a good risk. So where that runs into a problem is you could be very healthy and not qualify for good rates for insurance because some other things have come up in your life.
But they get it wrong because they swear that I'm a white woman, because I keep getting these tanning commercials. It's like, nope, sorry.
Well, the other areas that we're seeing,
not a perfect science.
The other areas we're seeing technology impact is particularly as with the younger generation, what we call the millennials, et cetera. There's a lot of movement to utilizing what were we talking about the other day? Predictive or automated systems.
Big data.
Yeah, big data. And also just small data in terms of apps managing their money. They're much more likely to use that online robo-advisor type app to try and help manage their money. But despite all that, what the industry is seeing, research is showing, is it doesn't address behaviors. And so the two behaviors that cause the biggest problems with people with their money is fear and greed. And so they're thinking, we're going to ride this pony all the way to the, home. And then all of a sudden, when something bad happens, they jump out of the market, and they're out of the market and they lose opportunities. They stay in too long. And it's coming from those two behaviors, which goes back to not only the coaching of retirement, but preparing them through teaching them the right behaviors and preparing them to not let fear nor greed manage their money, manage them to manage their money. And so, you see people in robo-advisors didn't, in the last sharp drop in the market, a 10% drop we had a couple of years ago, didn't really help them manage their money through that process. People were jumping out when they should have stayed in and done what their plan said to do. And consequently, it comes back to us thinking about managing behavior.
Right.
It's not managing money as much anymore. I mean, that's a part of it, but it's really about managing behavior and coaching the client that we've got a game plan in place. We've got a backup to the game plan and a backup to the backup.
And a lot of times it's about staying the course. And there's a Dalbar study that shows what the average mutual fund does compared to the average investor. And it's amazing. The average mutual fund performs about twice the amount of the average investor. And the reason is behavior. So what we found that's very unique is, and why robo-advisors actually have become viable, is the investments. If we have the right strategy, the investments are going to do similar things over the course of time. But if we can manage the behaviors, oftentimes that has 90% or more to do with the actual successful outcome we have in the future.
Isn't that true of everything in life, though?
It pretty much is. But we get caught up on the numbers, like we talked about. It's like, oh, what's that hot stock that's shooting up? We better put everything in there. Or what's the best investment? And sometimes I say, let's shift our focus from the best investment to being a better investor, and that's going to give us a lot more result.
Great. So now that we're continuing to go down this list of non-financial considerations. I see that you have a list there. Did we miss anything?
Well, another one is satisfaction. And that's when you get to retirement, how do you feel about your current situation? I run into a lot of scenarios where people are looking at their neighbors. They have this RV, this boat, this house, this vacation house, and they're comparing that to seeing if they're fulfilled in their retirement or in their life. And you got to kind of step back and look at that, because here's one thing I can say is a lot of times things aren't what they seem. And what I mean by that is the guy that has the life you think you want. I've looked at his numbers behind the scene in the office, and he's in debt up to his eyeballs. So it's not as pretty a picture sometimes as it might seem, and kind of finding peace in your situation. The reality is, once you get to retirement, the situation is, here's the income coming in, and here's the lifestyle that we're going to be able to set up, and kind of finding a peaceful balance with that.
Mm. Yeah, there's a word for it, and of course on the air it's escaping me, but it's the scientific behavioral corollary of this, where we look at other people and we get unhappy because of what we think that they have. I guess in common language it's called envy.
Right. Exactly.
Yes, exactly. And our society is undergoing these technological changes through social media that I think drive that dissatisfaction with where I am, because I'm comparing myself to all these images that are being flooded in at me. And you really have to learn, and what we try and teach people is take a step back from all of that, because that's not real. What's real is what you have in your situation, and be there. Don't let this other stuff impinge upon you. You can look at it, but don't think of it as being, that's where I need to be.
And let's speak to marketing. We talked about, we talked about this briefly, Soini, yesterday. Be careful of the advertisements that show the couple on the yacht with their hair blowing in the wind.
With the beautiful silver hair blowing in the wind.
Life is perfect. Yes. I'm beautiful. And
at 70, you have the great body at 70. And I'm like, oh my God, look at me.
And all your kids are gorgeous. The grandkids are perfect. I mean, that's just not real life. So understand that's a marketing thing.
But my grandkids are perfect.
I understand, Joel. You're the exception. But that's something we want to pay attention to. There's a picture of retirement, I think we have, and then there's a reality of real life too.
Well, it's a picture of life, right? Like, I struggle with it too. So I want to ask a deeply philosophical question before
I like it.
Before we turn the conversation talking about RichLife Advisors and how y'all are building a team. So I wonder about this, because I often will try to ask questions that get underneath the image. And there's a beautiful body of work by Brené Brown around vulnerability, and that vulnerability is the access to connection, and etc. And I wonder about how, if it's possible for us to begin to have conversations that get underneath this Facebook or image that people are of perfection that people are trying to portray. The perfect CEO with the perfect life, and the wife and the business on the Inc. 5005, whatever. And some of y'all are listening, I know, and I'm sure you're great, but you're not perfect.
Right.
So how do we begin to have conversations that get up underneath that, so that people can just be real?
Joel, do you want to start, and I'll clean it up?
Well, that's a tough one.
Yeah, I know. I told you it was a deeply philosophical question.
I've been thinking a lot about it, and I think part of one of the things I'm trying to start practicing is the concept of stillness. I find in my own life that the more I let these other things impinge upon me, in whether it's work pressures, whether it's family pressures, or it's these other social images that come through, the more frantic I feel, I'm more at unease I feel. And so I'm trying to get back and take a step back from all of that. I'm just reading one book right now, and he literally turned off all social media, including television and radio and anything that didn't have to do with what he wanted to do to get to the point where he said, okay, all of that was noise. Now let me start adding back the items that have true value. And I think that's where that's where the individual has to self-assess, is what brings true value to my life. It's not the images I see out here. It's not trying to keep up with the Joneses. So what is it that brings true value to my life? And when you start there, then you start adding in, who are the people? Who are what are the things I do that reinforce that value? too often we're engaged with people who distract us from value in our value. And so we have to get back to where, and this takes, I think, time, and it's also sometimes takes that hard kick against our upbringing, hard kick against all the other pressures. You're the CEO of a company. You should have a certain lifestyle. I was talking to a person about cars a couple of weeks ago, and she made the comment, well, CEOs drive these, cars, and she makes it on it. And she equated success of the CEO in the business with the kind of car he was driving. Yeah. And that's not the truth. That's image. And so I think all of us have to step back and say, okay, what is true value? And start there.
And you keyed it up perfectly, because what comes up for me, we used to be, what are your top fears in retirement? And it used to be running out of money, maybe some healthcare expense, usually is in the top 3. And one that's come up the last few years is actually my life having meaning. What's my meaning in life? And Joel, you're really hitting on that, is that maybe we step back and have an honest conversation, get some real clarity, and not just maybe go into retirement, what my buddy expects of me, what would look good, what maybe I think I'm supposed to do. Let's get crystal clear on what's meaningful to us, what's fulfilling to us, and let's start creating a life to live that. Because we hit on this earlier. There's all kinds of things nobody talks about that happen if we're not finding that meaning and fulfillment. There's a big spike in alcoholism, depression, divorce. So that's why we need to address what's that life like individually for me that's meaningful. It may not be the golf course for everybody. It might be going in the cabin in the woods, writing your book. It might be traveling the world. I don't know what it is, but it is very much individual to you. And if we can find that meaningful thing for you and start building that into your retirement strategy, that's when I see it really starting to work.
So a couple questions there. I love, and usually I just ask questions, but I'll just throw something out for people who are listening. I love the idea of an electronics fast. Like people spiritually used to go off and they used to fast from food.
Right.
I take electronics fasts, and that's actually, I'm finding, more spiritually important than, giving up food, in terms of really beginning to quiet the mind and all that kind of stuff. So yes, y'all take an electronics fast for a weekend or a week or whatever, put the electronics away. And then the thing that I'm wrestling with around this, giving up the image and the car and, trying to work towards more authenticity in the conversations that I'm having, is who goes first. Nobody wants to say, that I'm the one that's having problems in my marriage, or I'm the one that's, actually struggling with alcoholism, or I'm the one that has a kid that's, having an opioid problem or whatever. Nobody wants to be the one that's that takes the mask off.
Living life without filters. I call it living life without filters. And living that life requires a certain degree of vulnerability. And that's the problem. I don't think you're going to find, as you do that, as you go into trying to build that circle of people that you can have honest conversations with, it's never going to be, I think, a large circle. I think what we've seen with social media is we can fill our circle with thousands of friends, but we never have a meaningful conversation with that friend.
Friend.
Yes, it's all surface. But if we find those 3, 4, 5 people that we have a true connection to, they become that honest sounding board that we can talk about. Speaking personally out of my own life, there's a period of time where I didn't have that kind of connection with people, where they could say, and they reflected they now reflect my values, but they can be honest with me. What you're doing isn't working. You need to try this. You need to try that. But their criticisms come from a position of, or their advice comes from a position of, we're on the same boat. We're wanting to go and we're wanting to grow together. As opposed to, very often, if you have a broad network of people who are very shallow in their meaning with you, I think that what we see is they tend to view life more negatively. And so the things like you're talking about, your major problems, you want to talk to somebody, they may offer platitudes, but they really don't deal with the issue for you. They don't help you, even if it's just I'm here to listen. So you have to find that 3, 4, 5 people I call who have your back when you go to war. And and research shows that's really about the most we can have in-depth relationships in our lives. We can handle about 3 to 5, maybe 7 people having that kind of relationship. And so that's the first step, find those people. Then the next step is opening yourself up and saying, I want to be honest with you and I want you to be honest with me. Not that we may hurt each other once in a while, but it's never coming from a sense of envy or jealousy or the negative side. It's because we're trying to be honest and truthful. And so it takes time and identifying that person.
Go ahead, Beau. I'm sorry.
No. And it's just this idea, you're right, as we talk about that, a saying's come up over the years in our business. It's you have to be real to live rich. And so, Eni, you talked about this idea of who goes first. It's so funny. And when we look at it, we can realize and accept it as, okay, I'm not going to go first, but I'm going to look impressive to this guy and you just keep going back and forth and everybody's stressed and nobody's happy. And you realized it was all for naught 20 years down the road. And now you're 80 years old and you missed the most productive, best years of your retirement. So it's really that person that'll take a stand and say, you know what? I'm not happy. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to create a life that I want to live on my terms.
Mm-hmm. And Joel, I totally get your point about having the inner circle of people that you can be vulnerable with, that you can trust. But I think the thing I'm probing for, especially on this show, as we continue to have conversations, which you all haven't been privy to because, maybe you've looked at shows before you were on, but we've been having this conversation over the past couple years about conscious capitalism and how to bring a higher level of consciousness into business. And I think fundamentally, this thing about being real is really fundamental to it because it allows us to then have the difficult conversations that we need to have rather than pretending like everything's okay.
Yes.
And so I'm actually thinking more on a system level, or even on my show. Like, I keep having conversations, which I'm very happy to have, about how great business is and how wonderful people are. And certainly the image of success, I think, is what any CEO who's coming on the radio wants to project.
Sure.
Let's be real.
Sure.
Right.
But I also, in service of this other thing that people say that we want, higher level of consciousness, we can't have that and then have the pretense of being perfect all the time as well. Like you can't have both things.
Right. You can't have both, and there's a little bit of a blend, because what happens when we start talking, I wrote a book and I had to explain a lot that I'm not saying you can't have success with money. I hope everybody has $100 million in the bank and you can do amazing, great things with that. And you could be very happy with that, but are you utilizing it? Do you have your strategy? Do you have your plan? Is it to that life that's meaningful to you? So it's really, I think a lot of us have an either or mentality in this world, that it's either about that image and the financial success, or it's about being happy and at peace and fulfilled. And really you can do both. It's just got to be very intentional, and you got to integrate it in a way that the world really hasn't showed us to do it.
And I guess that's and we're not going to answer it on the show, but I'm probing for trying to get at that and more effectively on the show, right?
Right.
Is get at that authentic kind of intersection of being authentic and talking about what's real, and still allowing people to have their social, social facade.
They're not bad in and of themselves. The problem is when you make them the value, these other extra, whether it's making a lot of money or it's having a lot of social media friends, etc. That's where the trouble and the conflict comes, is when those external forces become the value driver for who you are. Because then you're looking externally for value instead of finding the value internally. As Beau said, whether it's identifying your relationships that are important, identifying the meaning that lies behind your life, identifying all of that has to come from inside. But if you're trying to drive your image or your being and your wellness from external, you'll never reach that satisfaction. You'll always have this dichotomy that's going on. And I think what you're trying to say is, if you're successful in life, you should be turning that success outward to bring other people up, as opposed to seeing that I've got the biggest bank account. et cetera. That's how I'm interpreting what you're saying about raising the consciousness of success. And I think that we get trapped because a lot of our culture, a lot of our teachings and trainings and everything we go through in business doesn't really teach us about that side.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how to be more efficient making money. It's about how to cut costs. It's about how to increase revenues. It's about, all these other things, which are important and good in and of themselves. But when you take, I'm making $100 million a year, and that's defining me. Now we're in trouble. And that's when we hit retirement, that's when we run into the big problems.
The loss of meaning and identity.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because the articles are showing that as people are hitting baby boomers, the graying of divorce, articles are out there. People
we had a divorce. We had a divorce lawyer on a few months ago, and
Yeah.
he was like, the average age or the number of divorces in the 50s and 60s is like quadrupling.
Exactly.
Right.
So, and that comes from meaning. People don't have a self-generated meaning.
Or they've been unhappily married and waited the kids out.
Well,
Right.
Yeah. That's true.
That happens
That's true.
Beau, you were going to say something.
Well,
And
Well, no, what I've seen too, and this is surprising to people. Again, I think we're sold this from the time we're kids, is that a lot of the people that you would think we deal with this unhappiness. Sometimes who we're dealing with are people that are very successful. They've made all the money, they've hit everything, but they got there and they said, "Oh, wow, I achieved all that stuff. I got to that destination and I'm really not happy and I'm really not fulfilled." And a lot of times it's either getting to a point like that or either hitting some kind of a rock bottom with some kind of a crisis where somebody will say, "You know what, I'm ready to be honest and authentic. Let's do this a different way because I tried it the way I thought I was supposed to. It just didn't work for me." And that's really where I see people show up ready to have that conversation. And sometimes it's tough because we're talking about this. Sometimes it takes those kind of highs or lows to come to the table to do it the right way, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So you said, what was your quote? You have to live real.
You have to be real
to
live rich.
To live rich. Say more about that.
Well, it's going back to that same idea is we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest about our situation. What is the real situation now? What is the real? So many people don't know what they want their future to look like. So they're just kind of heading towards it, hoping things turn out all right. So if we can get really clear and be really honest and real with ourselves about those things, then we can live rich. And by rich, it's a play on words. I'm not talking about just financially. I'm talking we can live what I call true wealth. We can have a rich, fulfilling life.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that attracted me to work with Beau was after I'd read his first book, Living a Rich Life. And as an advisor, his whole approach has been, there's more to life than money. Money's necessary, and you want to have money to do the things you want, but doing the things you want should come from your self-satisfaction of who you are, not just simply to keep up with the Joneses. And that was looking at how other advisors were running their businesses, et cetera. The emphasis has always been on, we want to make sure you as our customer, as our client, we want to understand who you are, and we want to understand that your goals are aligned with that. And we want to make sure that is so that we can help you achieve the financial freedom you need to be happy in that life and not have that major stress of, are we going to run out of money, et cetera.
And it's amazing to see people actually get really excited when we go through a process and help them get clear on that life, what they want to live. And that's what we're looking for. And I can tell when somebody their eyes light up, they start talking a little faster. Okay, we're tapping into something here. Let's move toward that. And people will actually, when we talk about our planning, our strategy, how much more likely do you think they are to stick with it when they have some kind of pull that they're really excited about and looking forward to? And I call it, let's create a retirement that absolutely lights you up. And then I think that's a little bit different message, but I find it's the message that really resonates with people these days, and they're looking for that retirement. So it's not this old message of I retire, my best days are behind me, I'm just going to wind it down and kind of hang it up. But you know what? My best days are ahead of me. I'm going to go do all the things I always wanted to do. I'm going to learn the things I didn't have the opportunity to. I'm going to travel to places. This is actually the best time of my life. And when I can see people move towards getting really excited about it, then it becomes fun.
Great. Well, I was going to talk to you about your team and everything, but it looks like we've run out of time. So I would love it if you would share like whatever is new and exciting in your practice at Rich Life that you would love for listeners to know.
Sure. Really, if the new, well, we really have a success pack. If you go to RichLifeAdvisors.com, I wrote a book called The 12 Steps to Retirement Success. And what I love about this, the book is not actually the book. It's at the end. I have an assessment. It's a retirement readiness assessment where you can see, okay, where am I as far as being ready for retirement? Are there items I need to address? A real simple tool. We can get that at RichLifeAdvisors.com. And also I do a podcast called The Retirement Resource. So you can check that out where weekly I'm giving tips, tools, things to help you navigate a successful retirement.
Very good.
Yeah.
And if folks want to get in touch with you to hear more about anything that you've mentioned today, how can they do that?
I think Rich Life Advisors, if you go to the website, RichLifeAdvisors.com, it's going to be the easiest way to touch base with us.
Yes.
Very good. So listeners, we've been talking to Joel Wilsford, the Chief Compliance Officer, and Beau Henderson, CEO of Rich Life Advisors. Thanks for a great show, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Had fun.
Yeah. So listeners, it's CEO exclusive. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Soyini Koch. I hope you have a prosperous, productive, and very profitable week. Thanks.
This show is brought to you by Anona Enterprises, where strategy is your access to money and performance. Learn more at AnonaEnterprises.com.